Hello everyone. In this video, I'll tell you a few stories about cheating. The first story. The Amalfi sun beat down on Clara's face, painting her skin with a golden, deceptive glow. Deceptive because beneath the tan, a web of guilt and anxiety clung to her like sea salt. Beside her, Liam, her husband of 10 years, laughed as he wrestled with a rogue spaghetti strand. He was perpetually sunny, a human golden retriever, and right now, that was almost unbearable. They were supposed to be celebrating their anniversary, a decade of navigating life's choppy waters together. Instead, Clara felt like she was drowning in a tidal wave of regret. It had happened fast, a whirlwind of Hollywood glamour and unexpected attention. She was a costume designer, relatively unknown outside the independent film circuit. Her break came when she landed a small role on a Marvel project, a few background characters, some wardrobe adjustments. That's when she met Ethan Vance, the Golden Boy director, the man who could turn comic book panels into cinematic poetry. He was everything Liam wasn't: complex, intense, and breathtakingly charming. He saw something in her, something beyond her practical skills. He saw a spark, a potential that she hadn't even recognized in herself. Flattery, she knew now, was the devil's finest weapon. Their connection ignited during late-night brainstorming sessions, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the shared pressure of a massive production. He praised her ideas effusively, made her feel vital, indispensable. And then, one rainy evening after a particularly grueling shoot, they crossed a line. One stolen kiss, a hesitant touch, and suddenly, they were tumbling down a slippery slope of clandestine meetings, whispered phone calls, and stolen moments that felt both exhilarating and utterly wrong. The affair lasted only a few weeks, a brief but intense flame that burned bright and then fizzled out as quickly as it began. Ethan, pragmatic as ever, recognized the potential damage and ended it. He was a master of controlling narratives, even his own. He gave her a polite apology, a fleeting squeeze of the hand, and then disappeared back into the whirlwind of his life, leaving Clara adrift in a sea of shame. Now, in Italy, surrounded by beauty and Liam's unwavering love, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on her. Every loving gesture, every shared memory, felt tainted. She imagined a neon sign flashing above her head: adulteress. "Clara? You okay?" "You're miles away," Liam said, his brow furrowed with concern. She forced a smile. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." 10 years, Liam. "Can you believe it?" He chuckled. "Neither can I. You're stuck with me now." He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and familiar. The contact sent a fresh wave of guilt crashing over her. She longed to confess, to purge herself of the poison that was eating her alive. But the words caught in her throat, choked by fear. Fear of losing Liam, fear of destroying the life they had built together, fear of facing the consequences of her actions. Days turned into sleepless nights. She replayed the affair in her mind, dissecting every moment, searching for a way to justify her behavior, to lessen the sting of her own culpability. There was no justification. She had betrayed the man who loved her unconditionally, and for what? A fleeting fantasy, a momentary lapse in judgment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara finally cracked. They were sitting on their balcony, sipping wine, the silence thick with unspoken tension. "Liam," she began, her voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked at her expectantly, his eyes filled with that familiar, unwavering love. She took a deep breath, struggling to find the words that would shatter their world. I met someone, on the Marvel set." His face remained calm, almost unnervingly so. He took a slow sip of his wine. Ethan Vance, he asked, his voice flat. Clara gasped. How did you know? He shrugged. I'm not stupid, Clara. You were different when you came back. Distant. And I've seen the gossip columns. Marvel director spotted lunching with costume designer. It wasn't hard to piece together. The relief of finally being honest was immediately overshadowed by the crushing weight of his disappointment. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed everything, from the initial flattery to the final, painful goodbye. Liam listened in silence, his face an unreadable mask. When she finally finished, exhausted and raw, he simply said, I need some time. He got up and walked into the apartment, leaving Clara alone on the balcony, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows. The following days were a blur of strained silences, awkward meals, and separate beds. Liam was civil, but distant, his golden retriever energy replaced with a cold, impenetrable wall. Clara didn't know if they could recover from this. She had broken something fundamental, something irreplaceable. She had traded the solid, dependable love of her husband for the fleeting allure of a Hollywood dream, and now she was paying the price point. One morning, she found a note on the kitchen table. Gone for a walk. Need to think. It was signed, simply, Liam. Clara spent the day pacing, racked with anxiety. She knew she deserved his anger, his resentment. But the thought of losing him, of losing their life together, was unbearable. As twilight approached, she saw him walking towards the apartment, his shoulders slumped, his expression desolate. He stopped at the balcony, looking out at the darkening sea. Clara approached him cautiously. Liam, she said softly. What are we going to do? He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and something else. Something that gave her a sliver of hope. I don't know, Clara, he said, his voice hoarse. But I know I love you. And I know I don't want to lose you. But I also know I can't just pretend this didn't happen. We have a lot to talk about. A lot to work through. But maybe we can find a way to rebuild. If you're willing to try. Clara rushed into his arms, burying her face in his chest. I'm willing, she sobbed. I'm so willing. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing. But as they stood there, in the fading light, clinging to each other, Clara knew that they had a chance. A chance to rebuild their relationship, to learn from their mistakes, and to emerge stronger, more resilient, and more deeply in love than ever before. The golden sun of Amalfi may have set on their old life, but perhaps, just perhaps, a new dawn was breaking. A dawn that, though scarred by the past, held the promise of a future forged in forgiveness and renewed commitment. The second story. The scent of lilies always brought a lump to Clara's throat, a bittersweet cocktail of guilt and longing. It wasn't lilies themselves, not inherently. It was the memory they evoked, the ghost of a summer afternoon drenched in sunlight and perfumed with the intoxicating sweetness of forbidden desire. Clara's life with David was a painting rendered in muted grays. Comfortable, predictable, safe. He was a good man, a reliable provider, a loving, in his own pragmatic way, husband. But somewhere along the neatly manicured lawns of their suburban existence, color had faded. The vibrant hues of passion had been bleached out by routine. Enter Marco, the flower seller with eyes the color of a stormy sea and hands stained green from a life spent coaxing beauty from the earth. He set up his stall every Saturday at the market, a riot of color amidst the grocery shoppers and dog walkers. Clara started buying flowers weekly, a small indulgence that brightened their kitchen and, dare she admit it, her soul. Marco saw things in Clara that David no longer did. He saw the spark that still flickered beneath the veneer of suburban respectability. He noticed the way her eyes lingered on the vibrant blooms, the almost imperceptible sigh that escaped her lips as she inhaled their fragrance. He called her Bellissima with a sincerity that sent shivers down her spine. Their conversations, initially about roses and ranunculus, deepened gradually. They spoke of dreams, of disappointments, of the quiet ache of unfulfilled potential. Marco spoke passionately about the language of flowers, about how each bloom carried a hidden message. He told her lilies meant devotion, a cruel irony that twisted in her gut. The affair began subtly, a brush of hands lingered a fraction too long, a shared glance that held more than just polite interest. Then, one sun-drenched afternoon, it exploded with the force of a summer thunderstorm. Clara, feeling suffocated by the stifling predictability of her life, found herself drawn to Marco's stall after the market had closed. He was packing up, the setting sun painting the flowers in hues of fire and gold. That he looked at her, his eyes filled with a knowing that made her heart pound. He didn't say a word, just held out a single, perfect lily. She reached for it, and their fingers brushed. The lily fell to the ground, its pure white petals bruised. That night, in the cramped space behind his stall, surrounded by the intoxicating scent of 1,000 blossoms, Clara surrendered. The guilt was there, a constant, gnawing presence, but it was momentarily drowned out by the wild, exhilarating rush of desire, the feeling of being truly seen, truly wanted. Weeks turned into months. Clara lived a double life, meticulously maintaining the facade of a devoted wife while stealing moments of passion with Marco. The lies became easier, the justifications more elaborate. But the guilt grew, a corrosive acid eating away at her conscience. One Saturday, David surprised her at the market. He wanted to pick out flowers for their anniversary. He found her, her face flushed, talking animatedly to Marco. The air crackled with an unspoken tension that David, usually oblivious, couldn't miss. He bought a bouquet of lilies, his eyes hard and unreadable. That night, he confronted her. He didn't shout, didn't rage. He simply asked, his voice laced with a quiet sorrow that cut Clara deeper than any accusation, "Is it true?" Clara broke down. The years of stifled emotions, the weight of her lies, crashed down on her. She confessed everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of guilt and regret. David listened, his face etched with pain. When she finished, he simply said, "I think you should leave." Clara packed a bag and left in the dead of night. She didn't go to Marco. She knew, deep down, that what they had was a fragile, fleeting bloom, beautiful but ultimately unsustainable. She drove aimlessly, the scent of lilies clinging to her clothes, a constant reminder of her betrayal. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with shadows and doubt. She had shattered her life, traded the muted grays for a brief flash of vibrant color, and now she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret and the faint, lingering perfume of lilies in the air. The question now was, could she ever forgive herself, and more importantly, could she ever learn to love again, honestly and without the crushing weight of guilt? The third story. The scent of lilies, a fragrance Amelia had painstakingly chosen for their 10th anniversary, now felt like a cruel mockery. They filled the kitchen, a space usually buzzing with laughter and the comforting aroma of simmering pot roast, now thick with a silence as heavy as a tombstone. Across the granite island, Liam shifted, the dimpled smile she used to adore absent from his face. He was a shadow of the man she knew, his eyes darting around the room, refusing to meet hers. "Amelia, I..." He started, the words catching in his throat like shards of glass. She raised a hand, stopping him. The tears she'd been fighting for days finally broke free, tracing glistening paths down her cheeks. "Please, Liam. Just tell me." He squeezed his eyes shut, the muscles in his jaw clenching and unclenching. It happened, a few months ago. With Sarah. Thomas's teacher. Sarah Peterson. Young, vibrant, everything Amelia felt she was slowly losing as the years piled on. Sarah, who Liam had praised for her dedication, her passion for teaching their son. Sarah, who now held the sickening key to dismantling their life. The kitchen swam before her eyes. She pictured Liam, dropping Thomas off at school, lingering a little longer in the hallway, captivated by Sarah's enthusiasm. She imagined the stolen glances, the hushed conversations, the lies he'd fed her to cover his tracks. How could you?" she whispered, the question a hollow echo in the cavernous space between them. Liam finally met her gaze, his eyes filled with a remorse that felt both genuine and utterly useless. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely audible. "It just happened. I was stupid. I was lonely. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Lonely? Amelia wanted to scream. Lonely while she was juggling her demanding career, managing the household, and pouring every ounce of her energy into raising their son? She felt a cold fury rising within her, a stark contrast to the initial shock and devastation. "Did you love her?" The question tasted like poison on her tongue, but he hesitated, and that hesitation spoke volumes. Amelia knew. She knew with a certainty that shattered the last remnants of trust she had for him. "This is it, then?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. He looked at her, his face etched with a mixture of fear and relief. "Amelia, I want to fix this. I want to try." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Fix this? You broke it, Liam. You shattered everything we built." The next few weeks were a blur. Lawyers, paperwork, the painful division of their shared life. Amelia moved into a small apartment downtown, the stark white walls echoing the emptiness she felt inside. Thomas, confused and heartbroken, spent weekends with her, his small hand clutching hers tightly. The guilt gnawed at Liam, but the affair, born of a fleeting moment of weakness, had irrevocably changed the landscape of their lives. He tried to talk to Sarah, to salvage something from the wreckage, but she was already distancing herself, the reality of their transgression dawning on her. One evening, months later, Amelia found herself driving past Thomas's school. She saw Sarah Peterson walking towards her car, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. For a moment, Amelia considered stopping, confronting her, unleashing the pent-up anger she still harbored, but then she saw it, the hesitant smile on Sarah's face, the way she unconsciously smoothed her hair, hoping to catch Liam's attention as he arrived to pick up Thomas. And Amelia realized, with a profound and unexpected sense of relief, that their life was already over. Liam's indiscretion had poisoned the well, leaving them both adrift. She drove on, leaving Sarah standing alone in the twilight. The lilies were long gone, their scent replaced by the crisp, clean air of a new beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, Amelia felt a glimmer of hope. She had a son to raise, a life to rebuild, and a future to define on her own terms. The pain would linger, a constant reminder of the betrayal, but she would emerge from the ashes, stronger and wiser, a survivor who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love, once broken, can rarely be pieced back together. And sometimes, the only way to heal is to leave the wreckage behind. Weight of guilt. The fourth story. The scent of lavender and regret hung heavy in the air of Amelia's meticulously organized kitchen. Lavender potpourri, a new attempt at aromatherapy, and the regret, of course, was all her own. She'd always loved the scent, a calming balm in her otherwise structured life. But lately, Even Lavender couldn't quell the turmoil that churned inside her. Mark, her husband of 15 years, was late. Again. He worked long hours as a lawyer, she knew that. But the late nights had become a constant, a relentless encroachment on their life, a life she'd carefully crafted and cherished. Dinner would be cold, the wine would lose its chill, and the hollow space beside her at the table would grow wider with each passing minute. Amelia was a creature of habit. Routine was her solace, order her sanctuary. She ran a small, successful stationery business, designing bespoke wedding invitations and elegant thank-you notes. Her hands, adorned with simple gold rings, were steady and sure, capable of transforming a blank page into a work of art. But tonight, her hands trembled as she held a glass of chilled Pinot Grigio. The seed of suspicion had been planted weeks ago, an insidious weed that had quickly taken root in the fertile ground of her insecurities. The late nights, the vague explanations, the way his eyes skated away from hers when she asked about his day, it all added up to a sum she didn't want to calculate. Then, last week, the lipstick. A vibrant, almost offensively bright shade of fuchsia, smeared on the collar of his pristine white shirt. He'd blamed it on a colleague, a clumsy hug at a firm party. Amelia had forced a smile, a knot tightening in her stomach. Tonight, fueled by 3 glasses of wine and a gnawing, undeniable truth, she decided to confront him. She paced the living room, rehearsing the words she would say, the questions she would ask. She wanted to be calm, composed, but anger simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. The headlights finally swept across the living room window. The familiar click of the key in the lock sent a jolt through her. Mark walked in, his face tired, his tie loosened. He managed a weak smile. "Hey, honey, sorry I'm late. Big case, you know." Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines etching around his eyes, the forced cheerfulness in his voice. And she saw it. Not just the physical evidence, but the guilt. The hollow echo of lies bouncing off his soul. "Mark," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Who is she?" He froze. His color drained. "What are you talking about, Amelia?" She took a deep breath. The late nights, the excuses, the lipstick, Mark. It's all adding up. "Who is she?" He stammered, tried to deny it, but Amelia cut him off. "Don't. Just tell me the truth." He crumbled then, the facade of control shattering into a million pieces. He confessed. Her name was Chloe. A cosmetologist he'd met at his gym. Someone younger, vibrant, someone who made him feel alive, he said. Amelia listened, the words hitting her like physical blows. The carefully constructed world she had built around them, around their love, crumbled before her eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia felt numb, detached, as if she were watching this scene unfold from a distance. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" He offered a string of clichés. He felt lost, unappreciated, suffocated. Amelia didn't want to hear them. The truth was, he'd chosen someone else. Someone whose face he touched every morning with a fresh, eager glance in the mirror. That night, Mark slept on the couch. Amelia lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, the lavender potpourri now a suffocating reminder of a life she no longer recognized. The next morning, she woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. The anger had subsided, replaced by a steely resolve. She wouldn't let this break her. She wouldn't let him define her future. She walked into the living room and found Mark, his face etched with remorse. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice firm. "I want a divorce." He pleaded, begged her to reconsider. But Amelia was done. She had given him 15 years of her life, and he had repaid her with lies and betrayal. She deserved better. Over the next few months, Amelia rebuilt her life. She poured her energy into her business, creating new designs, exploring new avenues. She took yoga classes, learned to paint, and reconnected with old friends. The pain was still there, a dull ache in her chest, but it was slowly fading. One day, while browsing a local art gallery, she saw a painting that captivated her. It was a vibrant landscape, full of color and light. She bought it and hung it in her living room, replacing a portrait of her and Mark that had been there for years. As she stood back to admire her new acquisition, she smiled. The lavender scent still lingered in the air, but now, it smelled not of regret, but of hope. She was finally free to write her own story, design her own life, one exquisite page at a time. And she knew, deep down, that the next chapter would be more beautiful, more vibrant, and more authentic than anything she had ever created before.